Andrew's technology career spans over 20 years in market-leading investment banks, most recently at CIO level, and his areas of expertise include high-volume, highly available transaction processing systems, as well as process automation, workflow, and client-facing technologies. So with that, I shall hand over to Andrew Porter.
I think Brendan used the term technology optimist as a segment, or I think actually I might change my job title from Chief Product Officer to Chief Technology Optimist, because as you can see, omnichannel is hard, and I'll go into some of the reasons why. It's hard for retailers, but it's hard for the providers as well. But we think we've got some certain advantages to help you in your omnichannel journey. So just moving on. So I'm going to cover two main subjects. I'm going to talk a little bit about Brightpearl, just a couple of slides to set omnichannel in context. But the meat of the presentation is going to be the results of a survey that we've just conducted around omnichannel in the mid-market. It's literally hot off the press. I don't think it's actually finished yet. I think there's another week to go. But we've got some really interesting results. And you can see, because it's just come out, it's not a setup, but it actually underpins a lot of what Brent and Brendan have said in the mid-market. So it's going to be interesting. So Brightpearl, we're an enterprise class platform. We're secure, we're resilient, and we're performant. I mean, some of our retailers are doing flash sales, throwing 10,000 orders at us in a few minutes, and we're soaking them up and processing them. And we're seeing that kind of volume even in the mid-market. So we always build for volume. We build for enterprise class software in the mid-market. We're 100% retail focused, unlike a lot of our competition. There's no compromises in the software for multiple verticals. There's no compromise in the business. We're 100% retail. We call ourselves a commerce management platform. That really means we process all the sales orders, but we also process all the purchase orders and many more things beside. And as we're processing that trading activity, we're updating your financial records, your accounting in real time. So there's no more waiting for the end of the month to see how you're doing. Your financials are as up to date as your last order. So you can see your financial performance minute to minute, day to day, which is really differentiating. So that's kind of who we are, but what do we do? I'm not going to go through the whole laundry list, but as Brendan said, omnichannel is not a thing you can just switch on. You can't just turn on the omnichannel button in Brightpearl and everything starts flowing in different directions. There's a lot of foundational stuff that you have to put in place. So I'll just run through it quickly. So in Brightpearl, we plug into all your channels. So that's your web store, eBay, Amazon. We also plug into your bricks and mortars channels. So we've got our own home-built point of sale. The reason we built a point of sale, we do integrate with third parties, but as you have seen from what Brendan and Brent have said, on these omni-channel journeys, there's a lot of information that has to flow into the retailer. So we wanted a completely open POS where if someone makes an order on a big commerce website, we can flow that through our infrastructure. It can be pushed into the point of sale and end up in those poorly performing assistants' hands, or the 19% that actually are going to do a good job of upselling to that omnichannel customer. We've also got warehouse management. We've called it Werewolf. It's actually a Brightpearl built product. The reason we called it Werewolf is because actually it was just such a good name, we just couldn't let that one go. So I was surprised it wasn't taken. But again, if you don't have the warehouse management system, so you know what's coming in, what's going out, you're doing the stock takes to kind of correct your inventory all the time, it's really hard to do accurate omnichannel fulfillment. We're also plugged into the shipping processes, ShipStation, you're an aggregator, but others. And we have an app store and an open API, so we're plugged into a lot of the other e-commerce ecosystem. On top of that, we have CRM. So you can picture that single authoritative view of the customer for the retailer. If you're not plugged into all of that, you haven't got that single view of the customer. You need to know what they bought in store, on the marketplaces, through the web stores. We've got that view in Brightpearl, which is a fundamental building block of delivering true omnichannel. On top of that, because we're seeing these large volumes from retailers, They want to protect their margins. They want to do more with less people. We've built an automation engine on the top of it. So all of that functionality can now be automated. So the run-of-the-mill transactions can run through, and the retailer can focus on the exceptions. You know, something's gone wrong with an order, they can actually focus on customer service rather than the kind of mundane transactions that are kind of most of their volume. So that's just Brightpearl. But the interesting thing, so the survey. So as I said, it's a work in progress, but we've 206 responses already. It's US specific. It's sent out to 3,500 CEOs and senior managers of significant mid-market retailers. And I'm going to share with you the results right now. Nobody's seen this before, so kind of feel excited. Okay, so we had to ask the question first off. Again, I think Brendan said, you know, he doesn't really talk about omnichannel anymore, but what the first question says is, you know, how many sales channels do you use? And, you know, undeniably, it's a multi-channel world. You can see over 2/3 are using multiple websites. In this survey, you know, 3 out of 10 were using marketplaces, Amazon, eBay specifically, and 4 out of 10 are using telephone orders, physical stores, still there, as we know, mobile, social commerce, and interestingly, wholesale isn't there. You know, 4 out of 10 of the retailers questioned are doing B2B as well as B2C, and that fits with what we're seeing in Brightpearl. There's very many retailers who have a hybrid model, so that's definitely a trend that we're seeing in retail. So definitely a multi-channel world, but what about omnichannel? Now, Brendan's stopped answering this question, but it's a survey, so we had to ask it. You know, do you believe omnichannel is important for success? And to be consistent with Brendan, this wasn't set up, but 91% of the retailers responded yes. And actually, we asked them to rank 1 to 5 the initiatives that they thought would most drive growth. And again, over 1/3 said the omnichannel retail strategy was the number thing that would drive their growth, above new product lines and new sales channels. But also, interestingly, new sales channels, if that's the second one, that just exacerbates your omnichannel, you know, issues. So very consistent there. So everyone believes it's important for success. So what are they doing about it? Actually, what does it mean to them? And I think actually this came back, and this is very encouraging. I mean, Brendan and Brent broke it down in a slightly different way, but it does show that these retailers do understand omnichannel is a multifaceted problem. So we've got 7 out of 10 potentially, you know, in the left-hand side. They understand it's about customer experience. They understand it's about marketing strategies. They understand it's about the fulfillment, the plumbing. I was slightly surprised that only 4 out of 10, you know, think about it as seeing the ability to see all their customers' orders in one place. A little low, but broadly, I would say the mid-market kind of gets omnichannel in terms of what they need to achieve. It's important, they understand it. What are they doing about it? So again, in the mid-market, 85% have a strategy in place now. 7% are planning to invest. So we've got 92% of the population who have a strategy around omnichannel and are planning to implement technologies to fulfill that. Okay, so you know, they understand it, they've got strategy in place, but how are they getting on? Only 4% have mastered omnichannel, you know, lucky them. But the real message here is that for 55%, omnichannel is a work in progress. And you would expect that because of all the things that Brent and Brenda have outlined, it's a difficult thing to crack. So the next question was, what progress have you made on omnichannel as a mid-market retailer? And you can see here, we've set out all the different areas. There's about 10 of them where you need to kind of invest to deliver the omnichannel experience. If you kind of ignore the grey at the top, because no plans to implement, that's probably the 9 or 10% where it's not relevant to the retailer, or the 9% where it's a pipe dream and they've just given up. You can see in almost every area there's more to do than there has been done. Probably with the exception, I think, cross-channel returns or exchanges, there's more done than there's kind of left to do, but really retailers kind of have to do that. Otherwise, the customer experience is so bad, they'll probably end up with no customers, as you were kind of pointing. And actually, knowing the markets I do, I'd say that is slightly optimistic. You know, I am a technology optimist, but you know, omnichannel's been around a few years. It feels like actually filling up those kind of pinkish bars in the next year is going to be difficult. So, you know, work's in progress, but there's a lot of work to do for the retailers in omnichannel. The next question we ask, okay, so what are the top 3 challenges relating to enhancing your omnichannel strategy? So, number 1, communicating the value and need to senior management. Now, after seeing Brendan's presentation, I think that's all you need, and senior management will be solved. There's so much opportunity, but it does take some great minds to articulate that benefit for your company. It's probably going to be a very costly thing to do because you can't just switch it on. There's all the building blocks I talked about you need to have in place. So it's a non-obvious business case, I would say. And actually, again, I think Brendan talked about you need data, you need processes, but you also need the supporting technology because it's too complex to run and too expensive to run as, you know, a human-driven process. So the third thing was choosing and implementing new technology. Which brings me onto the kind of final slide, which is a little bit sobering, but in some ways good news for the platforms. So only 9% of the retailers service have the right technology in place to execute an omnichannel strategy. And that's probably not surprising because even as a good retailer, over the last 10 years, you've probably built your channels in silos because you didn't really have any other option. You couldn't see the future. And if you haven't integrated those silos as you went, which would take a lot of forward thinking and probably hold you back from delivering those channels to the business, then you've got some retrofitting to do. So I think actually, you know, Brent talked about the front of house. I've talked about the back of house. There is kind of hope even for the people, it's a pipe dream. With these kind of platforms that provide, you know, we put lots of R&D, you know, millions of R&D into building out this omnichannel infrastructure. And I think, you know, these SaaS platforms, these cloud platforms, give these retailers the kind of opportunity to almost re-engineer their business by moving on to modern technology that is multi-channel, that is omni-channel, that does give you a single view of your data, does give it you in real time, and does give it you in the cloud. That's the opportunity for the mid-market in my mind. So that's me. Thank you for your attention, and I'll hand over for questions.